Welcome to another Whitehead Moncton podcast. Today we're going to be talking about education law and all things school. It'll be myself, Graham Jones, one of the directors in the Family and Education team, along with another fellow director, Antonio Fletcher, a recent joinee with us, who is the firm's expert on education law. Is that a fair description of you, Antonio, do you think?
Well, I think jointly we have that title, don't we? I think let's go with that, joint specialist.
But we do come at the education sector from different angles, though, don't we?
Yes, we do. I think between us we've got many years of cumulative experience within schools and the school environment.
No mentioning ages at this point, of course.
I myself, I'm a trustee of a local multi-academy trust. I was previously a governor at a maintained school as well, and I know you, Graham, have various appointments.
Yes,
had various appointments.
What made you get into the governor side of things in the first place?
I think it was, from my perspective, I'd already worked within the education sector for about 7 or 8 years in terms of my clients. I also have a wife who is now head of school, wasn't at the time, but she was a very keen advocate for me to get involved and help the local community. And the two things combined with an interesting opportunity to become a governor at a local school, and I took the leap and enjoyed seeing it from the inside out rather than the outside in.
And mine was completely different to that. I have 3 boys, and when they started school, I mean, the eldest now 29, when they started school, I thought, because I work so hard, their education could just pass me by. And so I was chatting to the head teacher, and he mentioned about governorships, and I'd never heard anything about it before. And he said there was a vacancy, so I stood and I was appointed. This was at Edgerton Primary School, and it sort of snowballed from there. I only ever intended to be involved in it whilst my children were at school, but I went through a number of schools as a governor. I was chair of governors for a considerable period of time. I was a local league governor working on IEBs, and I've sort of stood back a bit now, and the only current appointments I have, I'm a director of a schools trust, but I'm also a trustee of a university education establishment, so I'm sort of seeing the education system all the way through, having started at infant and primary level and now working in it up to university level.
Yeah, it's interesting to see actually the challenges that further education institutions have, many of which are quite similar actually to schools and multi-academy trusts from the school's perspective, but they also have additional challenges when it comes to the funding elements and the looking after of, let's say, young adults as opposed to children.
Yes, I think one of the interesting things is most parents don't appreciate what goes on in the running of a school. And I'm sure a lot of parents will be surprised to hear that the governors and the directors are all volunteers. They're not paid roles. And it's a considerable commitment because it is a complicated beast to run a school. And if you're talking about a multi-academy trust, you have many millions of pounds going through that. It is a little business in its own right.
Oh yes, definitely. And actually I think that's one of the things that's changed over the course, or is certainly developing into change over the course of the last 15 years or so, that with the advent and increase in academies and academisation, there is much more of a focus as looking at the trust and the trust finances in particular, almost as if it is running a business effectively, trying to find different sources of income, using those to the best potential, attracting pupils and parents to the schools, and finding ways to differentiate compared to, let's call them, the local competitors.
Yes, I mean, going back, well, even when I started becoming involved in this, you either had schools that were run by the local authority or the independent schools.
Yeah.
And of course, along then came academisation, which has gone through a number of formats over the last 10 plus years. And we are now at a situation where academies are the norm, and eventually the local authority run schools will disappear? I mean, what's the current situation with the academies?
Yeah, well, at the moment, I think it's fair to say that in Kent, we've got a few academies, well, a few schools that are part of much larger academy groups with 10, 20, 30 schools in, but the majority are still quite small trusts with, let's say, between 3 and half a dozen schools in. Now, the way that the government is trying to shape things for the future and over the course of the next 7, 8, 10 years is to make those trusts much larger. They're talking about a minimum of 10 schools inside each trust for it to run in the way that they would like those trusts to be run. And it makes sense, sort of sitting here from the perspective of a trustee of a MAT. A lot of the financial burdens that smaller MATs experience would probably be absorbed within a larger MAT, thinking of economies of scale, being able to use the same resources across multiple schools and sharing practices and different ways of doing things that are either improving the curriculum or improving the efficiency in which the school is being run. And that does lend itself, that collaborative approach, to larger MATs potentially being a more effective way of doing things. Now, the risk I always think there is, as with all organisations that get bigger, is not losing their identity. Lots of schools have particular reputations, particular specialisms, things that the local community like, and those definitely need to be maintained, and schools definitely need to maintain their identities as schools rather than being swallowed up in, let's say, a more corporate feel. But I think over the next few years we are going to see a lot of larger MATs. I think we're speaking from the perspective of the local region of Kent. I can certainly see that a lot of the MATs will be looking to merge, will be looking or may get swallowed up by these bigger existing MATs, and will face those challenges about their identity and maintaining what works well as adapting and absorbing new experiences and new.
Do you think there's a geographical issue in this? Because I mean, initially when Marty Academy trusts were coming off, it was worth saying that initially you could be a standalone single academy school.
Yep.
But that's clearly not what the government want going forward. But do you think there's something to be said for the larger MATs being regional based, because you were having trusts that was spread all over the country, and you do wonder how you can have any cohesion between them?
Yeah, I think there's certainly challenges. I think that there always needs to be something in common, and geography is a very easy thing to have in common, and grouping together within a particular town, a particular region, makes a lot of sense. Other things in common schools might have is particular specialisms. Schools with particularly high reputation, and let's say for sport or theatre, might want to look at combining their efforts and building specialist trusts that focus on those areas alongside learning. But I agree entirely with you. If those trusts are entirely spread out across the country, that does present very different challenges, particularly from a management perspective, and maintaining a clear message and a clear way of doing things across the whole trust.